Alright, black to move. You have 5 seconds. Tell me whether it's a win for white or a draw. And your time starts now. And time's up. So, what was your answer? Let me know in the comment section. So, this particular scenario, black to play, it's a draw. Now, why it's a draw and how you can quickly calculate it? Is there a straightforward way? Of course, the trick here is uh, black to play, black needs to go a5, and even if white king has this pawn as a decoy, tries to gobble this up, the black king will simply try to run to c8 and either try to reach a8 and b8 to blockade the pawn, or even if he's not, the king is on a7 or a8, the white king is on a7 or a8, black king will keep here the white king at bay, uh, with these three square being the key. Now, in this position, how can you calculate this easily? How, if these pawns are moved up and down, if this pawn is moved left or right of the board, how can you calculate whether this is a win for white or a draw? Uh, so let's start with the most basic theme for this. The first rule basically you need to remember, if the side which is stronger, so in this case white side, if this pawn is beyond the halfway point of the board, so basically fifth row, then it's always going to be a win. How? If you move this up, this is always going to be a win, no matter white or black who is it is to play. So that is first rule. If halfway point is crossed by the rook file pawn, it's always going to be a win. Second, to calculate or to understand different positions that may arise, we'll set up a normal position. So how will normal position look? Something like this, where the rook file pawns are at the center of the board, of course a4, a5. Then you look at this particular diagonal. In this case, h3, c8 diagonal. What do you exactly look on it? Whether the pawn, the passed pawn, is on it or beyond it. If the pawn is on the h3 c8 diagonal or beyond this particular diagonal, then as well it's going to be a draw. Is it true? Let's see. If I push it just smidge one place below on f4, then it suddenly becomes winning for white. So why this happens? Of course, this depends on relative position, but the rules eases it up. You look at the h3 c8 diagonal, you see whether the passed pawn is beyond it or not, and you can easily determine. Now here we need to understand the relative tempi as well. Right now, white has one tempo. Why? Because the pawn on f4 is just one square behind the f5 square, right? The in the h3 c8 diagonal. If it was here, okay, then white pawn had two tempos, 1 and 2, and black had none. Now black can also gain tempos if these two pawns will shift here. Now black has one tempo, okay, one reserve tempo you can say, and if you move it here, then white also has one tempo. Why? Because this pawn can go once before reaching the c8 c3 h8 diagonal. So if you push it here, black king will now have two tempos. So if I move it here, then yeah, it's a draw. Theme remains same. White can try to push this up and use this as a decoy, try to push it up and then go for this. But black king will always be able to reach the c8 square or a8 square basically. Now, if you move it here, okay. Now what happens? On e5, white pawn needs to reach e6, which is three tempos, right? 1, 2, and 3 moves white will need. And now it's 3 versus 2. Of course, black can only get 2 tempos in this such scenario, maximum. So if you have more than 3 tempos, then white is basically winning. I think that sums it up. The rule is quite easy to understand. If your pawn is beyond this diagonal, yeah, h3 c8, uh, then it's losing. Of course, if you do whatever, right? Now you can, okay, if it's black to move, you can still try to do this. It's not going to be useful. Again, black king will reach c8. Hmm. Now, what can we look at? Okay, yeah, but one thing we can look at is this. What happens in this scenario? We did say if the pawn is on h3 c8 diagonal, then it's going to be a draw. Uh, White to move, black to move, it's still going to be a draw, right? How? Yeah, you need to calculate a little bit. So let's say it's black to move. Oops, black to move. Um, or can try this, right? Uh, Now black king is as far away from the pawn as he can. Now, okay, sorry, yeah. Now you will run back. Yeah, will reach. So, no matter what, according to a rule, if the pawn is on h3 c8 diagonal or beyond it, it's going to be a draw. Um, what else? Yeah, one more small thing we can consider in this. So we already know that how many squares the pawn is behind the king. Behind the h3 c8 diagonal is how many tempos, uh, particularly white king has. So let's say in this normal position, now white has one tempo. That's why white is winning, whereas black has none. Uh, but if I shift it here, equal tempos, one and one, both sides. So it's a draw. What happens in this situation? Of course, uh, now white has, in this scenario, white has two tempos. What if 2 minus 2? Again, it's a draw. But you have to consider the position of the king. So, how many squares for pawn to reach the particular square on the diagonal is the number of tempos. But if the king is in front of the pawn, then that is additional one tempo. In this scenario, even though black has two and white has two, but because the king is in front of the pawn, then that is considered additional one. So now white has three tempos, whereas black has two. So again, white is winning. Uh, let's see. That's why in general also everyone must be knowing if white king is able to reach in front of the pawn, then even in if these pawns were not on the board, then this is their winning because white gets a position and he is able to queen this pawn itself. So if the pawn is in front of the sorry, the king is in front of the pawn, then that is considered additional tempo, and no matter what, uh, white king will win. Uh, Yeah, I think that is all there is to it. You check how many tempos you have in this situation. This will be our normal position, okay, where the rook file pawns are on the center of the board. Then you look at the passed pawn, whether it has passed c3, h8 or a3 f8 diagonal. Is the pawn on it or beyond it? Then it's a draw again. If it's behind it, then how many then how many tempos white has and how many tempos black has. We need to take a look at this as well. It's a black to move, and this is the position. Now, according to our rule, black has one tempo and white has one tempo. Okay, one pawn push. The king, although above the pawn, it's bit ahead, right? And on the edge of the fight. So black to move. Last time we saw that, yeah, black is able to keep the white king on the edge of the file. Now we can go here, but the problem is now because the pawn was on the first rank, uh, if king g2 happens, then pawn is able to run away. That is the only last position in this one, which could be an issue. But yeah, this is again simple. The rule I think is quite clear, and hopefully it helps everyone. Yeah, that's all. Thanks.